Hi,
Hi.
welcome to Taqat's podcast, season one. It's such an honor to have you here. And yeah, I am really looking forward to our conversation, mainly because I think when you and I have had conversations, it's always been so soulful and deep and beautiful. And yeah, Mehak is someone I met at Wild Womb last year in August 2025. She was a participant at Wild Womb, a beautiful women's retreat by Meher Malik. And I was there as a facilitator and volunteer. And I think we connected in that time, but I think we connected perhaps deeper with time, like after the retreat when we met. Um, and in the conversations we've had just through Taqat and outside of Taqat too. So I see Mehak as like this really powerful, embodied woman who is very deeply connected to her sadhana and herself and has had many years of experience in tantra, in yoga. But I would love to, invite you to also introduce yourself in whatever way feels right to you.
Wow. It's always so difficult to talk about yourself, especially after years and years of defining and redefining yourself through words. But before that, thank you so much for this opportunity to connect with you again. And like you said, we've had some amazing conversations where we both didn't know where they started, what the conversations were all about, and eventually where they led. But it always, each of them have always felt very, very real, very organic. Um, and I think that's the real beauty of, um, you know, having these dialogues with people like you, where everything just becomes a lot more easy to express rather than think 50 times before speaking. So thank you. Thank you for this ease. Um, how do I introduce myself? Well, today, after almost 2 decades of um, being a student, teaching, living, sharing practices of and the wisdom of yoga and tantra and um, Ayurveda and somatics, um, I would call myself a space holder, where in the shortest way possible, I help uh, people just come closer to themselves, their human experience, and to this experience called life that we are all constantly playing day to day. So, yeah, I think I will just leave it at that for now because it's the wisdom is so open ended and at the same time, inclusive of so much that there are times that I'm in loss of words of what to say about the last 20 years. So I'll keep it at that.
Yeah. When you even say the last 20 years, I'm curious, like, what led you into this journey, this path more deeply of, spirituality, growth, whatever word we want to use, but it's like you stepped into something, it sounds like 20 years ago. So what led to that?
Well, 20 years ago, I professionally started teaching. I, started the whole process of learning and getting certifications from a perspective of being a teacher. But the journey started, I think, another 15 years before that. While at that point of time, I didn't know I was walking the path. In retrospect, when I put so many things together, when memories come back, um, when certain patterns tell me to go back into life that I've lived so far. I see how uh, this journey was very, very, very much blossoming um, at, I think, as early as 5, 6 years of age. And it it started with, interestingly enough, it started with me hearing a lot of voices in my head that didn't seem like mine, and they were not anybody else's around me as well. Uh, that at that young age, I was like, okay, what is like, I would question, like, what is this voice that is coming? Like, there were times when every time it would happen, I would be like, where are you? What is speaking to me? Like, where am I hearing all of this? Because I would see my mom in my room and dad and, family and this and that. And I would be like, okay, there is something that is speaking to me in the background, but I would not pay so much attention to it. And as life went by, these voices became, they from whispers that were very soft, um, became much louder for me to ignore. They needed me to hear them. They needed me to pay attention to them. Um, they needed me to ask um, questions of the whats and the whys and the hows. And they needed me to, I think, just acknowledge and recognize the fact that it's going to be a part of me, whether I accept it or don't accept it, right? And of course, and these voices became even more prominent when I was going through, at the age of like 8, 9, when I was trying to take care of a health challenge. And I was, as a remedy, I was put on literally on the playground, where I was asked to, run as a sprinter in order to heal um, and take care of this handicap. And these voices kind of became my support system, in a sense, where, because everything was so new, like emotional strength was very new as a language at that age, resilience and, not giving up, and failure and people pleasing and validation, and suddenly realizing you can achieve something. Everything became a part of this journey. And then, because I had no words, this voice kind of started adding language to all of it. In a very intangible way, and then also in a very tangible way. The innocent me thought everybody had these voices. Innocent me, the naive me thought, everybody has this, this one, what would you call it? Message coming through as a way of living your life on a day-to-day basis. And I remember having conversations with family and with friends, and I would be like, but we are doing this, but there's something in my voice, that in me, that says this is okay, this is not okay, this is how it should be, there's a deeper level to it. Ask, like I would, there were times when I was asked to ask the why, uh,
Mhm.
or say no or say yes, kind of, conversations or kind of messages. And everybody would be like, what voice are you talking about? Right? What are you even talking about? So then how, like, you, like, I realized that, okay, maybe it's not with everybody, and I kind of suppressed. And not suppression in the sense of, my God, I'm hiding something about myself. But at that age, I was like, okay, maybe it's not needed right now. Maybe it comes
Mhm.
back. Maybe it's just for me. and life carried on.
Wow.
Um, and of course, in that process, little did I know that intuition came very early, instinct came very early, insights came very early, um, a lot of seeing, a lot of feeling came very early.
Mm,
Um, and at the same time, I also realized how I I wasn't ready to live with all of that. I had to really like create that create that space within myself through all the ups and downs of life, um, to be able to really tune in to all of this that was happening.
mm.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but it was that seed, that voice that kind of blossomed and that took me one step at a time and disappeared for a while, came back, in different ways. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. And I think it's so beautiful to witness that actually, as children, we are inherently connected to our spirit, our essence, our spirituality, our intuition, our inner wisdom. Like, it's actually so present in us as children, but it's not often given space to thrive or to allow for more cultivation. So then, those of us who have perhaps experienced what you've just shared as well from a young age, we end up, in order to fit into what is happening around us, dimming that voice inside us and that connection inside us. And it says a lot about the state of our world and like how we ended up. It's just, how did we end up here? Sometimes I wonder, because clearly, like, there must have been a time which, when the experience you've just shared, there must have been a time where everyone around you would have also, like, speaking as if there was a time, there were possibly, like, when you could have had this experience and everyone around you would be receptive to what you are saying and understanding what you are saying, rather than saying things like, what voice are you talking about? Like, if I think about our human history, like, I'm so sure we lived at a time where that 100% happened, you know? Uh, to think, like, we have really gone very far from how our ancestors used to live. If, we are at a time now where we don't know of our own essence and spirituality. So when there is this child that is so connected to their essence and that nature that is actually present in all of us, we are questioning it and we're not able to fathom it. And it just blows my mind, because I'm like, wow, like, we have come a really, like, really long way from how perhaps things were at some point of her story. I think I prefer that word a lot more than history. Um, yeah.
As you were saying this, I realized that there were times, um, like you used the word dimming the light, right? There were so many times when, and I'm not even using the word spiritual journey, spiritual path, all of that
Mm,
here, right? Um, just very basic human need of, um, one of this need to be understood, or this need to be acknowledged and accepted, that okay, fine, I may not understand it, I may not have it, you have it, um, I may not know what to do with it, I may not know how to, um, hold space for you in a certain way. I mean, this word, of course, this language is kind of um, is very new for me in a sense. At that point of time, I didn't have that, this language. And there used to, of course, be a lot of like resentment and anger and why don't people understand me, and why didn't they see this earlier, and why wasn't I encouraged to be this way, and all of that. And today, after so many years of living with that, with all of these thoughts and beliefs and things like that, I realize that, one, thank God or life that I went through that experience of not being understood, of not being given space, of of not being accepted, or and even so grateful for the fact that around me there were so many people with very different capacities of understanding life and very different experiences of living life, because because very early on, I realized that there is no one way of living life. There's no one rule of living life. Just because I supposedly hear these voices does not mean life is going to play different cards for me, or I'm going to have another experience of living life. Is it going to be different from what my mom lived, or from what my family or other friends lived, who, let's say, did not have these experiences? But so early on, I realized life is so inclusive. Like, it has the space to hold all of us, like, in so many different capacities, in so many different ways of expression, and so many different ways of wisdom and intelligence, that suddenly I realized that we all belong here. And the struggle is when we feel like, at least for me, for a long time, the struggle was, I have a gift and they don't. So I have a better experience and they don't. I'm creating this separation between me and them. And therefore, somewhere creating a separation between me and life also, in a certain sense. That you have to give me something very special because you've given me something very special inside me. So, yeah, that sense of inclusion, I think, made me really experience life in a very, very different way at a very young age. Which is why when I would go through really dark moments, um, really painful moments, uh, be it, you know, everything from sexual trauma to abandonment to, people pleasing and validation, to this sense of arrogance that people perceived, which I thought was confidence, or, this sense of knowing so much and yet not knowing anything, of not feeling enough. All of these phases that I went through became such big doorways for me to realize that life is pulsating here as well.
Hmm.
So I feel very blessed to have this experience of actually being outcasted and then not being accepted. Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have accepted myself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you
That.
and I had this conversation sometime last, I think a few months back, where I think you also said, if it wasn't for that, this would not have happened.
Hmm.
So thank God for that.
Yeah. That's such a powerful way of reminding ourselves that actually every single moment of time is leading us to something else, something bigger, something more, even when we can't see it. Like, there is this divine intelligence at play, even when it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps as you think about it.
I'd love to ask you what perhaps living in deeper devotion to Mother Earth means to you as a human being, as a space holder, as also someone that's just alive and present in this moment of time in our.
Mm. Since we last spoke about having this conversation, um, I really sat with, when I really sat with myself, and, there were there were just these moments of unknown, because I realized that I don't have a sentence or a practice or a belief or teaching, so to say, to really talk about and center everything around it, kind of a thing. Um, and I kept wondering, what do I, what do I even like talk about? Like, what is my relationship to what we are calling Mother Earth, what we're calling life, in a sense? What does it mean to live in harmony? And the more I sat with this, and the more I got this in my being, I realized that the first thing I realized that, and I really feel it, is that I am this life, right? I am this, what we call this Mother Earth. I am what we are calling the consciousness of this planet, of whether we want to call it energy, whether we want to call it consciousness, whether we want to call it whatever we want to call it. I really feel, I am that, not because I understand it intellectually, not only because of that, but also because in this I am constantly experiencing the same pulse, that is moving in life, that is constantly moving in nature, that is, as whatever it is also moving through all of us, right? Um, there is so much of space. There's so much of space in this life, or rather, life has so much of space to hold so many truths, so many contradictions, and so many paradoxes. Um, there are seasons, and there are rhythms, and there are cycles, and all of that I also see and experience in myself on a very moment to moment to moment basis.
Mm.
And the more I connect to this aspect, that, or this reality, that हाँ but मैं ही तो हूँ ये, uh, the more it becomes easier for me to live life on a day-to-day basis as a human, and as this sense of very like togetherness. um I don't have a word for it. Like, I can only use this expression, like, there is this that's happening constantly. Like, there is me and there's life, and there's no separation, I feel. And of course, when separation comes, um I see life again, like I said, holding space, is also holding space for so many dualities, where everything belongs. Um, there is light and there's shadow, and there's movement and there's stillness, and there's a rock and there's a flower, and everything has a different capacity. Everything has a light of its own. Everything has a shadow of its own. And same way, like, I feel like all of this is constantly also happening in me. Um, and when I'm tuning to that, I think that's when I'm living also closest to life. Like everything is constantly changing. And I remember many years back, I don't even know when, one of my then gurus used to um, share knowledge on the Bhagavad Gita with us. And she used to say how everything is in life is constantly changing and nothing is permanent. And the 20 something me at that point of time, I was like, what does that even mean? Right? Like everything is constantly changing. I don't want this experience of happiness and joy and whatever it is, all the good times to change. I want them to stay. And when I would go through dark moments, I was like, how do I change this? Why is nothing changing? It has to move away from me as quickly as possible. Live that journey of just intellectually understanding it, that everything is constantly moving, everything is constantly changing, and yet there is underneath all of it something very silent, something very free, something very, I don't know, sthir. To be able to experience it is a very different experience. For that intellectual um, phase of just accumulating knowledge, of reading books, of going from one ashram to another, and you know, opening Krishnamurti and opening Osho and this and that, and questioning and learning and dialoguing and experiencing something completely different in the body, and a difference, such a gap in what we are understanding and what the body is doing. Um, even in the facts that, like I remember, uh, again in one of our healing rooms, we used to have these conversations around don't feel the pain or don't attach too much to the pain. Think about the positive. Think constantly or move constantly towards moving towards light and things like that. And I used to be sitting there as this really anxious, angry person. And I used to be like, I am sorry, but I can't move anywhere. You're telling me to think about love and light, but I can try. Intellectually, I can try for sure. But out of the 24 hours, when 23 hours I'm living in pain and anxiety and jealousy and anger, then what is it that I'm supposed to do? So much of it has been intellectually given, and so much of it has been also experienced. And to come back to your question of living in harmony, what it makes me realize is again the same thing, that everything exists for a reason. Everything has a place in my life, in my being, to belong, whether I like it or not. Yes, there is going to be an earthquake, and there's going to be a flood, and there's going to be a drought, and there's going to be moments of monsoons and flowers blossoming, and all of that as well. There are moments of survival, pure survival, and there are moments of such deep just deep aliveness and awareness. How can I, as a living, breathing person, exclude survival from my human experience? I mean, I'm sure you also have had, I've had some of the most awakening moments in pain. I've had the most awakening moments in very unconscious, unaware behaviors, you know, in stupidities, in ignorance, in complete ignorance. I today can't sit and say survival is bad. I today can't sit and say come out of survival into aliveness without acknowledging that survival has its own gifts.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing so much of that intelligence and wisdom into into this conversation, into this space, because yes, it feels like somewhere along the way we also became subscribed to a way of accessing spirituality that was all about love and light and these higher states of consciousness, and somehow anger and pain and jealousy and all of these emotions that are so part of our human experience. And I don't see a difference between human experience and soul experience. I think they are the same. And like somehow we, along the line of, I don't know, the way men kind of really started to speak of spirituality, it became this way of pushing away certain emotions, as if, you know, you need to, like, you can't transcend anger or transcend like pain and shame. Like, I think those emotions, they are so deep rooted in us as human beings, and they're not just also part of our lived experience, but so many of those that have come before us that are so coded in our body. And you can't just like do an Osho dynamic meditation and never be angry again. That's not how it works, and that's not how it should work. Like, our anger is such a powerful emotion to have a relationship with. And it does feel like somewhere along the way we started to create a kind of space within these spaces that want to push away these emotions and make it all about positivity. And I remember that there was a point I was reading a lot online about this phrase, toxic positivity. Because, yeah, somewhere when you are forcing yourself to feel good, or forcing yourself to be positive, you are actually numbing yourself from feeling the depth of your pain and your grief, and you are then transcending your human experience and your soul experience. You're trying to push away what your humanity is all about, what your soul really wants to deeply feel. And I think to maybe actually be in harmony with ourselves and with Earth, again, I don't see a difference between that. I think we have to welcome all of this. Like, we have to acknowledge that we live in a world, in a body where we are going to feel all kinds of emotions, and no emotion is better than the other. No emotion has more light than the other. In a way, our anger is also such a powerful way for us to experience our humanness. So why can't we make space for it?
Hmm. You know, when you were saying, when you're talking about transcendence, um, a big part of my journey started with transcendence. And of course, at that point of time, I did not have the human capacity to feel these feelings and not be drowned by them
Mm.
and not be consumed by them. Right? Because I could see that when anger was coming or when whatever emotion was coming, immediately it would suck me into its vortex. Right? And because I used to be constantly like, I don't want to be sucked into this vortex because I kind of stop operating and stop living life. I need to understand and experience a different way of a different relationship with all of this kind of a thing, right? In that process, both consciously and unconsciously, what I was being trained in a sense to do is one, to really build a lot of awareness of everything that is going on,
Mm.
right? Along with building that awareness, to also be able to hold space for everything that is going on. Along with holding space for everything that is going on, to also be able to pull back when I need to pull back, to jump in when I need to jump in, to participate and play when I need to play, the role of discernment in a sense, right?
Mm.
To cut off and detach when possible. And it became because it came so early in my life, this whole process of transcendence, of building awareness and living with it. Because it came so early in my life, there was a beautiful advantage of it that so many things in life did not touch me, right? And at the same point of time, I also saw myself bypassing a lot. I also saw myself detaching in a very dry way to life.
Mm.
Like there were days when I would literally like a hermit go into a cave and not come out for hours at a stretch, right? There
Mhm.
would be like I could sit in 10 hours of silent meditations without anybody teaching me how to do it.
Mm.
When this phase of transcendence started fading away, and suddenly these emotions became another doorway of wisdom for me to live through. Um, like, and I'm sure for a lot of viewers, they would probably understand it as the very Shiva path and the very Shakti path, right? Like suddenly when I came in a sense to the Shakti path of feeling it all and being it all and, really using my senses and, or, living life in a very different way. I realized that if I did not learn transcendence or did not experience transcendence and awareness, I would have gone into a vortex that could have created even more chaos than
Mm.
what already existed. right? And I mean, like you, I've over 20 years been in so many different rooms with so many different teachers as a student, as a practitioner, as a teacher, this modality, this wisdom, that wisdom. And ultimately, I realized that while we are continuing to really talk about or really, experience life in so many different ways, it is really you as a human being who can discern for yourself what works today and what doesn't work. Like, I don't wake up every day sitting in 10 hours of meditation, right? There are days when I don't want to meditate at all. I just want to water my plants. There are days where I don't even want to do an asana practice because I've done years and years and hours of asana practice. Just because I'm not doing it right now does not mean it is any less sacred. Today, if I'm able to really sit and connect with my being and tune in and say, okay, what is it? What do I have the capacity for today? What is my life right now? What is it asking for? Am I in full survival zone? Where is my nervous system? There is no one definition that I'm sitting with, and there is no one rule that I'm sitting with. That just because my nervous system is in fight or flight, I have to bring it down to rest and response. There's a reason why fight and flight is happening. And why the need to constantly regulate? Why the need to constantly be believing that, like, there are moments where I'm in the shower and I
Mm.
don't feel shit. I don't feel the water droplets. I don't feel like I'm even present there because there's something else running in my mind of what I want to cook in the kitchen.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
And because there is this spiritual pressure in me of being present with what I'm doing, like, shit, I'm supposed to be present and I'm supposed to feel these water droplets on my body and be in this experience. And you know what fucks me up? Sorry to use this language, but what messes me up even more than not being present is the pressure of being present.
Yeah.
It's okay if I'm not present right now. It's okay.
Mm.
I mean, imagine if we are sitting in a very privileged
Mm.
space, having these dialogues and having these conversations about life and about consciousness and about awareness and about a better way of living and a better way of relating to Mother Earth and all of that. What about that garbage picker out there who's living in pure survival, who doesn't know where the next meal is going to come out of?
Mhm.
Is life not living for him? Like, is life not pulsing for that person? Is he
Mm.
also not living life in his own way? So why sit here with conclusions and dictating how to live?
Yeah.
I really don't.
Thank you for again bringing such a powerful point up. I think that in one of the conversations in this podcast with Lilia, she also said something along the lines of, we are all taking ourselves a bit too seriously as well. And yeah, I think somewhere living in more harmony with Mother Earth is also welcoming this non-seriousness as a part to our humanity. Like, everything doesn't always have to make so much sense, and everything doesn't always have to be like, this is how it is. Like, the experience you shared of yourself in the shower, I resonate with that. Like, there have been times with me where I have um felt that way too, and I'm like, okay, I'm too much in my head, like, come back, come back. But maybe there's some beauty in also like, in that moment of time, going away from our body and being in our head, thinking about what you want to cook for lunch, and me thinking about all the work I want to create and do. Like, that's the kind of thoughts I end up going into in the shower, and that's part of life too. Like, you know who's to say that that is not also just our human experience, our soul doing its thing? Like, to be present 24/7 means to just, I think, be presence with this sense of aliveness, this pulse of life. Like you rightly say, everyone is experiencing in their own ways, and just welcoming that as a whole even more. Yeah.
And I think that's also somewhere the beauty that I experience in teachings of yoga and tantra, in a sense, right? Because it met me where I am
Mm.
in through different phases of my life. And it also gave me according to what I was ready to receive, right? Every time in the 20 years that I've done an asana practice, it's been a very different experience. Every time I've done the same meditations, or the different practices and the different tools, there's such an evolution, no? So at one point of time, as a 16-year-old, when I started in asana practice, all I wanted to do was have a good stretch because I was running too much and I wanted to stretch my hamstrings because my coach told me, open your legs. I mean, open, stretch your legs so that you can run better. And today the ask, in a sense, from the practice is so different, right? Even if I'm still stretching, what I receive is, or what I experience is so different. And I mean, sometimes, again, you and I've had these conversations. We open up social media and we look at our algorithm, and there's one person saying, eat this. 2 minutes later, the other person is saying, don't eat this.
Yeah.
Breathe this way, don't breathe this way. Move this way, don't move this way. Have this belief, don't have this belief. For a human being who's overloaded with information that is so easily accessible today,
Mm.
so easily accessible today. I mean, literally, there are times when now that when I work very one-on-one, mostly with women, and when they come into the room, even though I may somewhere sense what is it that they're going through, or what is it that they may need at that point of time, but I cannot ignore their very present capacity in every possible way. What's happening in their mind, what's happening in their bodies, what's happening in their senses, what's happening in their nervous systems. what's happening in their in different aspects of their life. Um, so I'm like, okay, through conversations first, let's first even figure out if you need to come out of survival. If you are a single mother who's taking care of children and earning, taking care of some of your very basic needs as a woman,
Hmm.
you're a provider and everything. Maybe suddenly becoming really slow and let's name one practice, really slow and touchy and feely could be disastrous for you, right? So yeah, it's sometimes really like it's scary at times. And that's when I also kind of get into this sense of my responsibility as a space holder.
Hmm. Yeah.
If I can include everything about myself, and I know how long that has taken, that, that much opportunity as well, without any rules.
Absolutely. I think what you're sharing around responsibility is a big one as a space holder, and how, someone's body being in survival is also their body's way of coping and making sense of what they're experiencing. So moving them slowly out of survival feels important rather than going from 0 to 100.
Only
And
and only if they want to. Babes, only
yeah,
if they want to. Only if they are
yeah,
ready
for
for it.
sure.
Only if their
Absolutely.
lives say, okay, get her out of survival. Again, imagine the garbage picker. I mean, today in our privilege, if we can go to that person and say, okay, why don't you breathe better so that you can maybe, you know, have a better day. That person will say, can you just give me a glass of water?
Mm, yeah.
Is that wrong? I mean, or am I going to sit here in this judgment of, oh my God, this person doesn't breathe better, so is therefore not picking garbage properly?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that drop of water is what they need. That is what is actually soothing to them, maybe over this.
And the moment a human being says, okay, I've got this, can I ask for something more?
Mm,
Because that's the beauty of evolution, right? That life also gifts us with. Ask for something more. Yearn for something as well. Don't just settle, right? And the moment you start asking for something more, again, life says, okay, fine. What do you want?
mm,
It's such a dance. I constantly see it as this dance happening.
mm, yeah, it's true.
Where they're not sitting in opposites to each other. Nothing is sitting in opposite to each other, what we call polarities or dualities or ways of being. They're really just sitting in support to each other.
Yeah, and each thing is more needed sometimes than the other, and it's that dance of trusting that flow. What
Yeah.
you need as a human being, what someone else needs as a human being is different at different times.
Yeah. Like today, I'm like, I am going to dance. When I say dance, like live life as if nobody's seeing. And I'm going to live life as if every bloody person on this planet is seeing. You know, I love the hermit in me. I love it. And that's obviously something which is more natural for me.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I'm like, I love also when people see me and, validate me and, you know, I please them and, all of that. Why not?
Hmm.
I, this is, I'm maybe going a little off tangent, but I've had long conversations with myself and with everybody around on, again, like on topics like control and survival and ambition and purpose, freedom, you know. And I've noticed how we all have such fixed ideas about all of it. Either it is good or it is bad. Either I should have control or not have control at all.
Hmm.
And especially in our new age wellness world where everything is a trend and everything is a hack, um, where everybody is being told have no control in life and create no boundaries that limit you and flow with life and have no discipline. Wow. Imagine to not have control also requires control.
Hmm.
To have this sense of free flowing life that does not bother you or affect people around you also requires a certain amount of discipline.
Absolutely.
I that immediate either or rejection. And I see it in myself on a day to day basis, and I'm like, I'm getting into my own traps. you know, I create so many traps in my own head so many times,
Hmm.
and then life pulls me out and says, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to ask you if you feel like if we are, moving also towards evolved consciousness of some sort where the world is slowly getting better and maybe returning to older wisdoms and ways of living. If we are walking to a new earth of some kind, then what does that look like for you? Like in tangible form? Like what do you imagine as something that is very present in this newer world?
For many years back, I was in a room where I was taken through womb healing practices.
Mm,
And through that process, healing lineages, the others' lines, especially, right? And at that point of time, this concept of being a cycle breaker was a very big part of my being. I am the cycle breaker of my lineage, kind of a thing. And when I went into the process of it, and I experience whatever I experience, I realize that whether we believe it or not, whether we know it or not, whether we see it or not, each member of our lineage, or each woman, I want to use at this point of time, of our lineage, has been a cycle breaker in their own way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And what I what I realize through that more and more is that while evolution is always going to be a part of this pulse called life, there is also always going to be coming back to simpler ways of being, which makes life less complicated, uh, which makes life less confusing, which makes life less of a struggle. Um, it's almost as if, like, you have these subjects in school of maths and English and everything. Like, hated so many subjects. When life came as a subject to me, and I was like, okay, now I have to understand this and I can't escape it. I can't cheat it. I think the only way is to really live it the way you can on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it can be really simple and sometimes it can be really profound. Sometimes it can be really sacred and sometimes it can be really mundane. Um, Sometimes it can be in pure survival and sometimes you can be just in deep spiritual experiences. Um, so I don't know if simplicity is the way. It's one of the many ways. Because it will all be coexisting with everything else. Like what you were discussing last time, that there are going to be people who are going to live in the city, there are going to be people who will only live in Goa, and there are going to be people who will be shuttling between the two, not knowing where they belong. There's place for all of them.
Yeah. And just to shed more light on what you're saying, also about everyone that has come before us in a way have been a cycle breaker of their own. I really want to honor that. I think as women, I think I see that um, in the women that have come before me, like my mom's generation and my buas, my dad's sisters. Like at the moment, after leaving Goa, I've been very, you know, engulfed in their day to days, my mom's day to day, my bua's day to day, living with them. So I'm really seeing, like, I had this sense already come to me very strongly a few months ago when both my mom and my bua were part of my Reclaiming Your Power container. And having them there was such a enlightening experience for me to also realize that no, they had their own struggles. And in a way, their struggles were not so different to ours. And in so many ways, they have been cycle breakers of their own kind, like to even be where they are now as women in that generation. And now I'm been getting to witness that even more closely. And it really makes me feel that every generation has its role to play. We are also just in a dance with Mother Earth and the Divine Mother. Like, there's something that is moving with each generation that is supporting this evolution, and all we can do is actually be in surrender to it somewhere too and honor it fully. That I think for so long in my early years, like when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I had so much rage and anger towards the generation that came before me, like why this, why that, why do they think of things this way, why do they see it this way, why is like my culture like this? um but now I see it so differently, like as a lady in her early 30s, like yeah, really seeing it like very differently. And I see that they were also fighting a system. Always there's all we have always been fighting a system as a collective, and in our existence in this system, there are always more of us that are more willing to break the status quo. And in doing that, there is something shifting always. So almost as if that is also just the nature of life and the nature of existence and the nature of being.
Yeah, and I would not keep the men aside in this process of lineage, in this lineage as well, right? Like
Mm,
whether it's my father or my grandfathers, all of that, they also play such an important role, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it and acknowledge it or not, in in uh, in creating who I am, in a
mm,
sense, right? We want to believe that it's because we have wombs, there is, there's the maternal lineage that only needs to be acknowledged. But there is also, in that womb, there is also half a chromosome, if I can call it that, of my father, and therefore his lineage. So it becomes equally important for me to include them in this process of being and becoming whoever I am.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually in honoring the two as well that we can come into even more acceptance in our being of who we are as individuals, because we are not separate also from the people we've come from, and every single one of them, our parents, our grandparents, there is a thread that is weaving itself as consciousness, as evolution in the world, but also within us. And I think even as even just to acknowledge that in our day to day can become such a sacred experience should we allow ourselves to do that.
Yeah, and again, just coming back to your question on the new world, the newer world, and some tangibles, right? I love how we just go into so many different spaces and keep coming back. But, since we've been talking a lot about the sense of an inclusion of sorts of, all sorts of consciousness and energy around us, I'm also noticing how, whether it's in a group of family, friends, this, that, or even in teaching spaces, especially in teaching spaces, that um, somewhere we're all singing the same song, and at the same time, we all have our own individual tune. And like like you've been rightly discussing, that individual tune is our own very personal experience of our energy and our consciousness. And I see how somewhere that kind of does create a separation of sort between me and another person and another person and another person, right? And of course, me being human, there's also judgment that comes in. of like when I see unconscious behaviors, either outside or within myself, I'm like, really? Is that all you can be? Is that all you can offer at this point of time? And oof, there's anger, and then there's pain for all the state of affairs that are just happening around the world, and there's fear and everything, which of course is again a very like sense of a separation from me and people around kind of a thing. And if you asked me about tangibles, about what is it that I am doing to create this new world for myself constantly, there's this image coming through of the mind body soul matrix, and all its different layers and all its different bodies, like as a physical body, as an energy body, as an emotional body, as the bliss body. And I see how every day I have a very different capacity to dive into either all of it together or one at a time. um just taking care of this living temple, whether it's through breath, whether it's through movement, whether it's through practices, whether it's through the food that I'm eating, or what I'm watching, what I'm reading. There are moments where stillness and silence is very easily accessible, and there are days when I know I need to put in some little magic in to create that. There are days when I play with the senses and I engage with the senses again in everything that I'm doing, whether I'm eating food or I'm making love. And of course, there's also discernment to realize that, okay, maybe the senses are just getting overstimulated. So I pull out and I withdraw, um, and come into silence. Writing has become a big part in the last few years. Deeply listening to my body is again something that I'm enjoying a lot. Um, Giving myself permission to feel my tenderness rather than just very quickly jumping into doing something about it or feeling better or solving it. So, touch, holding myself it just becomes like this really compassionate medicine for me at times. And sometimes it's just being with the what is. Sometimes it's, just putting some sort of a practice, adding some sort of a practice to it, to move it. And sometimes it's just letting it be. So, yeah, just every day looks very different um, in the tangibles. And the hermit in me coexists more and more very naturally with going into community spaces where change is very visible. So, yeah, I think for now that feels like enough tangibles.
As we, you know, bring this episode to a close slowly, I just love to ask if there's anything you want to share with anyone that's listening, tuning in from wherever in the world they are. Mm, Anything you wish to share, something for them to maybe how they can be more present with their experience of life.
I think this would be more a self reflection as well. Um, and maybe some can pick up some pieces from here. One would be, this how we love making everything a to do list of a lot of what's, that we can do for us as self-improvement or getting better at just, just getting better at the human experience. And while this list of what's that is constantly evolving is very important, um, I also realize that the how and the why behind this what sometimes becomes even more critical in today's time and age. And for me, this was a very big game changer when the quality of the how or the why has changed with time. It has also automatically made a very clear impact on the what. So for me, like today, like presence and intimacy is a very big how. The depth is a very big how, and it's a non-negotiable for me. But that, of course, does not mean that, there's this pressure of this constant presence and intimacy. There are days when I notice I'm not, and that also is very beautiful to observe for myself. I think again, for being in this journey, reframing my relationship with pain and pleasure has been a really interesting ride. And I of course see a lot of conditioning still living in me of, this constant, this need to fix, this need to solve immediately something, and it has its own time and space. But I think really seeing the discomfort, really seeing the heavy, dense emotions as doorways at times for a deeper change, um, than just something to move away from. And yeah, there are days when avoidance is a very big pattern, at least in my life, right? There are days where I'm just sitting doing nothing, and I see myself avoiding life. And then I do a practice and I'm again avoiding life there in a sense, because I'm like, oh, I'm practicing something. So, I'll probably feel better. And there's a sense of an undercurrent of an avoidance that happens rather than just really being with the what is. So, and that's really shifted a lot in my relationship with pain and equally with pleasure as well. I think again, this making this living temple a priority as early as possible. Um, Whatever you can do for your body, whatever you can do for your mind, and there's so many different ways, right? There's no one rule as such for you to enter that space and start whenever you can. And I think lastly, for me, something that I've observed in myself, especially when I was a beginner, is outsourcing. There's a very subtle line between surrender and giving your power away. And while there are going to be always teachers and gurus and, hopefully guides that are very depth centric, and hopefully people who are living that whole teaching by themselves as an experience that they share with you. But in this outsourcing, what usually happens, and I've observed this for myself, is I put something up so highly on a pedestal, whether it's a practice or a teaching or a guru, that I just completely forget why I even came to them, which is to come closer to myself. And when that happens for me, or when it happened for me, it was a very, very painful experience. That how could I just give this power away so easily, or how could I just give myself away so easily? So I think keeping that sense of discernment, keeping that sense of a check becomes extremely critical in today's time and age where everybody looks like an expert and everybody is sharing knowledge and wisdom. For you to know that who the right teacher is a blessing. And yeah, there are no rules otherwise. You're going to this journey is everything, right? You're going to fail, you're going to die, you're going to remember, you're going to forget, you're going to swim, you're going to drown. So play with all of it, rather than holding on to just one way of being.
Uh, yeah. Thank you for such a beautiful, heartfelt conversation. And yeah, it's been such a joy and delight to share this space with you. And yeah, to everyone tuning in as well, Mehak is part of our global directory. You can see her profile. Should you feel also drawn to work with her, you can reach out to her. And we have a lot of free resources as well from different space holders that allow you to build a deeper connection with your body and with Earth. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Mehak. Lots of love.
So much. Lots of love.